Makawao, in upcountry Maui. There's no other place like it. It's far more than a popular tourist destination. Dig a little deeper, and you'll find a colorful community, a unique history, and breathtaking landscapes.
Makawao town has a charm all its own. You're up closer to the mountain, cooler weather, small, rustic country town.
You've got the pink shower trees, you've got the beautiful homes.
I like the openness, I like the space, I like the beauty of the mountains.
You smell the ohia blossoms, you hear the Hawaiian birds, you feel the mist, and you're really at peace.
Native Hawaiians inhabited Maui for over 1,000 years prior to the arrival of Europeans. For Hawaii's original inhabitants, Makawao was an important gateway to the forests of upcountry Maui.
When the first settlers to the islands arrived, they were from southern Polynesia. There were several migrations of people who colonized the islands sometime between 900 and 1000 AD, and a Hawaiian culture as we know it started to develop. Makawao was the transitional zone between a mid-dryland region and the upper forest. And coming up to the forest during the earlier settlement stage would have been mainly for the forest resources. Then as Hawaiian culture developed and the population grew, they started to expand into native hamlets, canoe workshops. There was a lot of Hawaiians, living up here.
European settlers arriving in the early 1800s brought rapid change to Hawaii, including Makawao.
Our great-great-grandfather, Garrett Parmalee Judd, came out as a doctor with the third group of missionaries that came to Hawaii in 1828.
My forefathers got here in the early 1800s, about 1830. And Reverend Baldwin came from Durham, Connecticut. His most notable child was probably Henry Perrine Baldwin, and he was the one that developed the sugar on this island, developed the water, and in 1888 put together a group of businessmen and bought the lands that became Halekla Ranch.
Through the late 1800s, Makawao and surrounding areas became a major center for agricultural development. This would lay the foundation for the cultural diversity that exists in Makawao today.
As the sugar industry developed, they needed workers. The Hawaiian population had been decimated by disease, so the first people they brought were the Chinese.
My grandfather came from China. He migrated because of hard times in China.
They came as single men, they intermarried quite often with Hawaiian women.
My grandfather married a half Hawaiian woman. She spoke fluent Hawaiian, and my grandfather spoke fluent Hawaiian also. He learned it, I guess, from her. So he could speak English, Chinese, and Hawaiian.
And the Chinese, they had a certain contract that they had to fulfill. But once that contract was up, a number of them became merchants and various other occupations in the community.
The Chinese had a major influence as Makawao town took form. But by the late 1800s, the sugar business was booming and more workers were needed.
They couldn't get enough Chinese, and so they found out they could get people from Portugal.
The Portuguese came mainly to get away from the poverty of the Azores and of Madeira.
Yeah, my grandmother's maiden name was Vasconcelos. I never met them. It's a long time, it's old people. And they all came on the boat, yeah.
My grandfather could speak and write English and Portuguese. And so he got a little bit of better job.
They had to fulfill a 3-year contract. But as soon as that was over, they all invested in land.
And they came in as a family. So they wanted to have some place to put their roots down. And so they homesteaded.
Some established their own ranches. Some became cowboys and workers at established ranches and really had a presence here in Makawao.
The plantations continued to expand, demanding new sources of immigrant labor. So in the late 1800s and early 1900s, others were brought in.
The sugar industry recruited the Japanese, and the Japanese were brought in such numbers that they became a significant part of the community.
My parents, both of them, were born in Hiroshima, Japan, and so they were first generation Japanese.
My father migrated from Okinawa with a contract.
And when the contract expired, the majority of the Japanese people continued working on the plantations, but quite a few people started businesses.
By the early 1900s, pineapple joined sugar as a primary industry on Maui. By this time, immigrants from around the world were coming to Makawao to find work.
The last major ethnic group were the Filipinos. But when I talk about these major groups, the major groups being Chinese, Portuguese, Japanese, and Filipino, that's really ignoring some of the other groups that were recruited.
Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, Japanese, Portuguese. I even met some Russians. We all blended.
Although they came from all parts of the globe, early immigrants had a lot in common, including large families and the tough life.
We had 2 bedrooms for 7 children.
All of us living in the house together, whether it was crowded, I never thought of it that way. We didn't even know we were poor because we all were.
I can remember we were so poor, we never had money. We would walk past the store and just drool, wishing we could go buy candy or something. There was no money.
People took care of each other. It was trade and labor, yeah? You don't have to have money, you have food.
We had turkeys, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had a garden.
We planted corn and cabbage and other vegetables for home use. And whatever there was left, then you could sell.
Growing up in Makawao wasn't all hard work. Children still had lots of opportunities to have fun.
We didn't have a TV, we didn't have computers, we didn't have iPhones, and we did everything outside.
Yeah, we played marbles with our cousins and milk covers and
jacks.
Jacks.
Forget jacks.
When you're not helping out if you could, you'd be out playing with your cousins out in the yard. And, be able to be climbing trees, running through pastures, go down to the weir, ride the flumes.
The mountain there, Mount Piholo, right below it, there were actually a lot of swimming ponds.
And all the neighborhood kids from Pukalani, Halimali, Kula, Haiku, wherever, this was like a swimming pool, but it's all natural, right? And it's how you made a lot of friends from all over.
When the youth weren't playing or doing chores, there was, of course, school.
Mrs. Cha was our teacher. And every week, she would give us cod liver oil. All of us had to drink a teaspoon of cod liver oil.
It's about 3 miles from our house to Makawao School. Rain, shine, or whatever, we walked all the way. And after school, you walked home again.
We didn't wear shoes. We went to school bare feet. Japanese children went to English school until 2 o'clock, and then we were sent to go to Japanese school.
Throughout the early and mid-1900s, sugar and pineapple remained the primary source of employment. For most Makawao youth, working at a plantation was a part of growing up.
We had Maui Pineapple Cannery and Libby Cannery. So during the summer, already at 16, we could start working in the cannery.
The boys either worked in the pineapple fields picking pine or in the sugarcane fields, and we gals pretty much all worked in the pineapple cannery.
It was very hard work, but sometimes we'd work 10-hour days.
Pressure working in the cannery where you have pineapple coming at you and the machine doesn't stop.
In 1941, the quiet plantation life in Makawao was shaken up and forever changed.
My first memory as a child was actually December 7th, 1941. I was 4 years old, and the reason I remember that day is because it was a very fearful day.
And we were up here on December 7th, I remember, and glued to the radio when the Pearl Harbor was attacked. And I remember that day I was just a little kid and I didn't realize what was happening.
I was in the first grade, I believe. The war started and they took over the school and had a first-class military hospital.
And that was the beginning, a real change, because overnight we saw barracks coming up.
So there were 2 naval air stations, there were Army encampments. One major thing is the 4th Marine Division. The 4th Marine Division was there for rest and recuperation between their missions in the Pacific. So we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of men.
I remember the Marines just lying rows and rows and rows of Marines marching down the road.
The relationships that developed between military personnel and the residents of Makawao made lasting impressions.
From the top brass down to the young guys, they made friends with the local families.
They became like our brothers. We were so close to them. And I can still remember my mother baking a birthday cake for one. That was his 19th birthday. He was from Virginia. And he said that's the first time anybody made him a birthday cake.
One of the major things that was really wonderful was the USO. Where Casanovas is today was a USO during World War II. And we have Ethel Baldwin to thank for this. And she was quite the lady. Not only did she establish it and organize it and get all the women to come up and be hostesses there, but she also visited it every day. So Makawao really put out their heart and minds to these service people.
The large number of military personnel in Makawao created many opportunities for businesses to grow.
Down by the theater, Iwaishi store. That became a very busy eating place for the military and as well as for the community.
On Kokomo Road and Lilikoi Road, right across the street, there's a building there. It's an old building, still standing.
Yeah, still there.
And that was my mother's hamburger stand. She said she sold thousands of hamburgers a day. But I don't know if it was 1,000, maybe 100.
Dad used to go and pick up the bags of laundry from each soldier. And my grandmother would help my mother, and we all helped.
I mean, it was a sad time, but yet we benefited from the war.
The war brought many changes to Makawao, but it remained a small, tightly knit community. With each passing decade, the people and cultures continued to mix into a unique melting pot of diversity.
We were the Portuguese family. Across the way was the Chinese family. Across the other way was Hiroshi Arizumi. He was the Japanese family. And we had a Filipino family on it at the end of the street. Up above, toward the Haleakala side of my mother's house, the Lamadoras lived, and they were a Hawaiian family. We all played together. We all knew everybody's names. We would ride our bikes up and down the street, and we all celebrated in different ways, and we all exchanged food.
You know, the Portuguese will teach baking bread, making sausages. Hawaiians teach how to make lau, kalua pig. And then they'd assimilate, get together and have parties and gatherings and share food. And it's kind of one of the things that makes this small community special, because of the things they took and shared and made, adapted and made part of their own.
The families used to live here. Nobody used to fight with one another or grumble with one another. Everybody was all like one.
And of course, that's how Pidgin developed, because they had to learn how to communicate. And they took words from one culture, one language, and adapted it until finally they could communicate in the fields and work together.
And that is how Pidgin was born. They would take words from all the languages you find on the plantation, mostly English, because those are the guys that was in charge, yeah? But they took words from the other cultures, words about food and life, daily activities. And for put them all together for make sense, they would use the grammar from Olelo, Hawaii, the host culture. And that is why, to regular English speakers, they hear us talk Pidgin, they think we're talking backwards, because we say stuff like, oh, so on my head, and cute your dress. The purpose of language is for communicate, yeah? Pidgin is how we've been communicating here in Hawaii for plenty years.
Of all the unique cultural elements that evolved in Makawao, none are more distinct than that of the Paniolo, or the Hawaiian cowboy. Cattle ranching in Makawao was established in the late 1800s by the Baldwin family.
Haleakala Ranch just celebrated its 125-year anniversary. For most of the 1900s, my grandfather, Sam Baldwin, ran Haleakala Ranch. My dad ran Haleakala Ranch for 30 years, and then I ran Haleakala Ranch for about 30 years.
Haleakala Ranch was a great ranch to work for. Yeah.
In the early days, the work of the Paniolo would often come right through Makawao town.
Back then, with no real paved roads or trailers to haul cattle, that's how they used to do it. You know, just right down the main road.
And many times we would be walking to school, and here we would hear the cowboys, hoy, 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 hoy. We would know, oh, here comes the cows. And they would bring that herd of cattle, maybe 200 or 300 of them at a time.
Mrs. Tavares used to scream, oh, the cattle's in my flower bed. And you know what was the answer? Put a fence.
Paniolo culture permeated and influenced every aspect of life in Makawao.
Most people didn't own cars, but the upcountry people, everybody had horses.
I used to go any place on a horse. I go barber shop, I go shows, and I go Makawao, sit down, Matsui store.
It was always interesting to see them coming, you know, still riding on the horse. They won't get off the horse and calling for cigarettes or, you know, a drink while they were still riding. I don't know what we did with the droppings.
That was a fun time, you know. You saddle up in the morning, jump on your horse, ride Makawao town, tie your horse up at the hitching post, drink a cup of coffee.
As kids, I used to take my horse and I used to ride it, meet my cousins over here, and we used to ride all over this mountain.
You can go almost any place you wanted to, you know. Before, all the gates didn't have locks. Just freedom, open. You could go someplace, you'd be the only one there.
Just like in any good cowboy movie, Makawao was a Wild West town where anything could happen.
Peter Baldwin had a horse by the name of Blue, and one time he rode it into the Makawao Steakhouse on a bet, and another time into Casanova's.
Oh, Peter, I think he's been in a few places in Makawao.
It wasn't always appreciated, but you know, that's kind of what we did.
Of course, we had some legendary stories about the horse coming into the barn. That was true. And I recall my dad saw when the horse came in, rather than yell at the person who was riding on the horse, he went up to the horse and asked the horse, "What do you want to drink?"
The ultimate celebration of Paniolo culture is rodeo. For the Paniolo of Makawao, rodeo was a time to put on a show and test their skills.
July 4th weekend has always historically been the Makawao Rodeo weekend, and we're now well into our 50 years. It's been the biggest and best rodeo in the state of Hawaii for most of those years.
When I have rodeos, we rodeo. I rode bulls when I was sophomore in high school. I don't know if you did sports where you put your life on the line. The hardest thing is to sign the entry blank, because you gotta go, eh?
And in those days, we used to compete with different cowboys from the different islands, and it was pretty competitive, good, healthy action.
Kicking off the rodeo every 4th of July is the long-standing Makawao Parade.
The Makawao History Museum.
The Makawao Parade has always been a standout. The horses, the color, the wagons, the people walking, the groups.
Makawao has seen a lot through the years. The old storefronts tell the story of a town built with pride and cherished by its residents. While many businesses have come and gone, others remain to this day.
We had a lot of mom and pop stores, and of course the famous Komoda Bakery, which is of course still in existence, just an amazing, amazing family.
We had a running account at Komoda store, and Mr. Komoda would deliver. Oh, their bread was so good. It still is the best today.
Remember when the butter was like 1 cent? You buy a cola for 3 cents, it's called nickel cola.
I used to walk up to a Matsui store, you know, the corner store in the very corner, buy a loaf of bread for a dime. And further down was Ichiki store, was our grocery store.
I like this picture of the store, which shows where the cigarette case was. And then we had the soda right next to it, and then the pastry case.
Just about everybody, before they went work or go beach or whatever, would probably pull into Quitalas, you know, get a takeout saimin or get some kind of something. A lot of the cowboys hung out in there too early in the morning, you know.
And the other store would be just across the street, the Iwaishi store. You could sit on a stool, order a breakfast or whatever, have ice cream floats or sundaes, and take a couple steps across the floor to the other side, and you have groceries, canned goods, and candies available.
And the bubblegum machine.
And bubblegum machine.
1 cent.
And the arcade machine.
And then, of course, Club Rodeo. You know, that's a landmark.
I'm sitting here at the bar here at Casanova's, and for many years, this bar, of course, was part of the old Club Rodeo restaurant, which was owned by my parents, Sub and Mary Molina. And I have a picture here in hand of what the bar looked like in 1962. And of course, things were much simpler then.
Of all the business establishments in Makawao, perhaps none are remembered as fondly as the old Makawao Theater.
Was 10 cents for children and 25 cents for adults. The ticket taker was Jimmy Brown.
Our grandfather used to be the ticket collector.
And Iwaishi store right next is where you bought your popcorn or your candy. They used to open on side right there.
Chocolate Coke.
Yeah, chocolate Coke and whatever, strawberry Coke. You buy from right there and then you go in the theater.
Iwaishi.
Yeah, the theater was all board seats.
Yeah, all board seats.
All board seats.
Like so many other things, the old theater with its wooden seats is now a thing of the past. With time, memories of what was slowly slip away. Plantations are no more, and life in Makawao continues to change.
When we were young children, as far as we were concerned, pineapples and sugar were forever.
We would pass cars up Old Haleakala Highway. And my father would wave at every car. And they would wave back because we knew who they were. It was a simpler time. It was a time in which we really had no worries. And we never, ever, ever expected it to end.
We were fortunate to live in a time where it was a real old country.
I realize progress coming and changes, but I hope it still stays the same small community and still keep it country style.
Makawao is built on a foundation of family, community, and tradition. It's a place of beauty, a place of history, and a place of rich cultural diversity. And for those who call it home, there's no other place quite like it.
I tell everybody, I was born up country and I'm gonna die up country.
We have blood in our land. And I think that's why I'll always be.
I've been all over the world, and Makawao draws you back. You raise up here, you get drawn back.